The United States is offering some tariff relief to Canadian steel and aluminum producers, but there is a significant catch. They must move production to the United States. This week, the Trump administration took aim at a number of trade irritants in Canada, like the provincial booze bans, prompting this response from Prime Minister Mark Carney.
Look, you know what's an irritant? 50% tariff on steel, 50% tariff on aluminum, 25% tariff on automobiles, all the tariffs on forest products. Those are more than irritants. Those are violations of our trade deal.
Jean Simard is the president and CEO of the Aluminum Association of Canada and one of those recent appointees to Prime Minister Mark Carney's Canada-U.S. Economic Advisory Committee. It's good to see you again, sir. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me over.
I want to get your reaction, if I can, to this latest move from the United States, something they had been kind of threatening to do, but they're now offering officially on the books tariff relief to Canadian and Mexican steel and aluminum producers if they agree to move production to the United States. How much of a threat is that to the Canadian aluminum sector in your view, sir?
It doesn't mean anything to us because it's an unfeasible proposal for the aluminium sector. You basically need to invest into capacity that will only come into service in 3 to 4 years from now to serve the automotive sector because it's specific to that sector. And if you do this, then you can have a tariff, reduced tariff from 50 to 25% on the equivalent capacity that you would be shipping from here. So nobody is going to predicate billions of dollars of investments on a tariff because it's all about the energy cost, not about the tariff cost.
Right, and even at that measure of relief, it's still a 25% tariff. I mean, does the math? I've never had to build anything in the aluminum sector, so I'm curious. Does it make economic sense for that level of relief for that type of investment?
No, it doesn't make sense because you're talking about billions of dollars of investments, and you don't know where the price of metal will be in the course of those years. So it's like fuzzy mathematics.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of that in this trade dispute, it seems. Look, one of the things we've heard about your sector, sir, is that with the changes in the United States, there's been a shift to new markets, in some cases in Europe in particular. Give me a sense of the state of things right now in your industry. That is this new European focus, is it offsetting the loss or the extra costs in the United States? And would those sort of shipments of aluminum ship back to America if things were to go back to normal, or do you stay in the U.S., stay in Europe and just adjust?
Yeah, so basically this all happened because of the 50% tariff kicking in back in June of last year, where over the weeks that followed, we left money on the table to the extent of about $600 million in a matter of a few months because we had to keep delivering to a market that was not factoring in the full tariff cost into the price of metal. But as we were doing that, we were building up orders to start shipping into Europe in the fall, which happened. And we diverted about, I would say, about 25% of what we used to ship to the U.S. was shipped to Europe over the following months, which caused a scarcity of metal in the U.S. because they were depleting their inventories to replace this metal. And as they did that, they had to start pricing in the full tariff cost. So as of today, we're still shipping to Europe because it's all a matter of price arbitrage. You compare the price you're getting if you ship to Europe, the price you're getting if you ship to the U.S., and you ship the metal that is what we call the commodity metal, you ship it to the best value market. So to this day, Europe is still very close to the U.S., so part of our production still goes to Europe, but the price in the U.S. has increased tremendously, exacerbated by the conflict in Iran. So today, the U.S. is paying more than about $2,000 a ton just because of the tariff than Europe.
For
the same ton of metal.
Yeah, you talk about fuzzy math. That is some real fuzzy math, right? For a president to try to drive down costs. So if there is a resolution, and I want to specifically get into the Canada-U.S. thing in a second, but does this new European focus, does this become a durable, permanent market expansion? Or would you slingshot back to the United States? Because we've learned some hard lessons about over-reliance, and Europe is not a bully, it seems. I mean, is this, how do you see the industry functioning in the medium to long term beyond this acute pressure phase?
Well, we are lucky because our plants are all seaborne. They all have access to both markets because of the marine logistics. So we've been present in Europe for decades. Remember, the Rio Tinto and Alcoas of this world are producing in the Scandinavian countries. They ship to Europe. They've been shipping to Europe from here. Alouette has been shipping to Europe also. So geographical diversification is part of our DNA. What's changed is the arbitrage situation between the price in the US and the price in Europe. So we have been able to play the markets accordingly. I think it sends a very strong message to the US that by far, especially with the Middle East situation, Canada remains the safest and most secure source of supply for a very demanding market that needs metal day and night to supply their manufacturing sector.
Yeah, it is a price spike of choice, recession maybe of choice, inflation driven by policy rather than circumstance right now. So all of that is happening. You know, you're diversifying and doing these arbitrage decisions, as you say, with the backdrop of this trade uncertainty. You've been brought into the advisory council with the Prime Minister to sort of plot a path forward. The U.S. is saying the sectoral tariffs, the 50% on your sector, on steel, and the other things on auto and everything, separate and distinct, these Section 232 tariffs from the CUSMA negotiations. Is that tenable, do you think? I mean, what would your advice be to the Prime Minister and Dom LeBlanc and the team, Ms. Charette, in terms of how to approach that split that the U.S. is putting on the table?
Well, I think, first of all, we don't have to accept it. And second, we should not accept it. Canada has to keep the bundle altogether because what the USMCA is something that we're very satisfied with as a country, as a sector. It's been good for the whole of North America, so there's not that much change to bring to it. Where there needs to be change is in the treatment that we're getting, which is not respectful of the CUSMA or USMCA agreement, which is the Section 232 tariffs. And if we don't resolve that in the course and within the same negotiation, I don't know what we're going to do there.
Well, yeah, that's certainly what the Prime Minister said when he spoke this week, right? Where he says these are more than irritants, these are violations of our trade arrangement. So, look, there are interesting signals about the state of things, some positive, but also these frustrations over the violations, the disrespect, the lack of resolution on things. The advisory committee is going to meet for the first time on Monday. I mean, what do you expect the core message to be to the government, from the government, and what's your level of optimism now as we seem to be moving into a pretty urgent period and phase on these discussions?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think the period is going to be loaded with ups and downs, and we have to up for that because it's the tone of the situation. Two, I think that the government bringing together this united front of industries from all across Canada is a very clear message that we have to approach this in full solidarity and work together to the benefit of the whole of the Canadian economy. That being said, all those sectors, and aluminium is included, have a very wide and deep footprint into the US, and we should be able, out of this exercise of that committee, be able to coordinate ourselves to be able to support the negotiations along the course of the coming months, possibly the whole of next year. So it's a very good convening platform to make sure that we are syncing ourselves between government and industry and be able to give more power to the negotiations with a united front that percolates into the U.S. industrial fabric.
Yeah, it seems, just as a quick final point, sir, that I think you'll be able to get a broad alignment. Certainly, looking at the cast of characters that the Prime Minister has assembled, speaking to many of them, there is a consensus, right, of unity and discipline and patience. Yeah. Just what is your optimism that America is going, the United States is going to change its approach in all of this?
Well, there's a lot of room for change in terms of approach, because right now there's a lot of theatrics. And there's a lot of pressure being put on Canada by using Mexico, by using all sorts of arguments to try to get us to the table in an unfavorable way. So we have to resist that. Mm-hmm. And I think that, it's all about timing in politics. As we get closer to the primaries, to the midterms, the tone will probably change, and will probably change from the ground up, because when you look at the polls in the U.S., when you look at the economic situation, the impact of the Middle East conflict that will not stop even if there's an agreement tomorrow, there will be pressure to get things done the right way for the North American economy. And that's where we have to land.
Jean Simard, President and CEO of the Aluminum Association of Canada. Appreciate the time today, sir. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me over.
U.S. President Donald Trump continues to stand behind his tariff strategy, saying it's bringing business back to the United States at the expense of Canadian industries.
We're leading now, and car companies are coming from Canada, they're coming from Mexico, Germany, Japan. They're pouring into our country because we're very smart. Should have been done long ago by other presidents. We were the car capital of the world 50 or 60 years ago, and then they just started taking them away.
Ahead of important trade talks with the United States, Prime Minister Mark Carney has formed an advisory committee on Canada-U.S. economic relations. This 24-member committee will be chaired by Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc. Its members include former politicians, labor leaders, and business executives from various Canadian sectors. Lana Payne is a member of that advisory committee and, of course, the national president of Unifor. Lana Payne, always good to see you. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, David.
You've been on, a version of this committee since you were appointed by Justin Trudeau. Now it's gone through some changes, as many things have under Prime Minister Mark Carney. How would you rank the effectiveness of the previous version, and what do you hope this one to be able to accomplish?
I mean, we're at two different points in time, so obviously there's no way that you could have an advisory committee in this moment that didn't include the sectors impacted, obviously, by the 232 tariffs. And what you've seen here is obviously the forestry sector has been added to the table. I think that's incredibly important. It is a more economic focused table, whereas the previous council had, even defense and areas like that on it. So this is to be very focused on how it is we get through this CUSMA review, and obviously where are some of the potential solutions to the tangle that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, tangle is a delicate word for it. I mean, but how do you see the composition of this? Do you see it fit for purpose? I know there's been some suggestion that cultural industries and maybe digital industries and tech industries aren't represented enough or at all, and they obviously are caught up in this. It's more on traditional industry. How do you view it?
I think that we have a start here. We're going to have a meeting next week, come together. As the negotiations with the U.S. carry on, I believe there also has to be another process, and that is sectoral tables and consultation tables that can get into the weeds of what it is we need to be doing. So I don't think this advisory committee is the only thing that the government will need to do on stakeholder consultations. And for sure, that'll be one of the things I'll be recommending. We need an auto table. We need a forestry table. We probably need a tech table, a culture table, and obviously, from the perspective of working people, making sure that this agreement protects them and protects their jobs.
Yeah, you obviously you're a close follower of politics. Obviously, Lana, I've known you for a long time, and you see the criticism of the Prime Minister's approach to all of this from the opposition about a lack of a clear strategy, no obvious clear wins. How do you assess the preparation of the country at this stage with that July 1 sort of date hanging out there in the window?
I'm one that is not too fussed about this July 1 date. You'll recall, David, that our union and me were very clear last year that we needed to not be in a situation where we were signing a bad trade deal that legitimized these tariffs, which are, for all intents and purposes, particularly when you look at auto, completely illegal, considering we have a side letter to the trade agreement that protects the auto industry from 232 tariffs. So sometimes we have to have a little patience, as hard as that can be, because it's been very painful for a lot of workers. But the cake is now baking in the U.S. Their economy is going through some rough patches. The president himself is having a bit of a rough time, I would say to you. And if you listen to the noise and the rhetoric and the posturing that is coming out of the U.S. right now, all of that to me is an indication that we get to a table at this moment, and the conditions are a bit better, I would say, to get this deal renewed. But also to look at what our demands are. It can't just be what the U.S. wants from this trade agreement. Canada needs to not be shy about its own demands, and I'd have a few of those myself.
Right. So, but how do you assess just how prepared, from what you've seen and what you know, Canada is? I mean, there's been a change in the lead negotiator. There's been a change in the ambassador. There's been a change in this particular committee. And, people on the outside of looking and say, this is late in the game for something like this to be coming together. I don't know if that's true or not, but what is your sense of it? Because I would presume it's hard to speak openly about what your strategy is without giving it away. But, people who have access to those meetings, I mean, what's your level of comfort here?
I believe we're in a place right now where we got to put all hands on deck and get this done. The reality is a deal is possible here, and we have to keep our eye on the goal, and that is to get these Section 232 tariffs removed, to do something around softwood lumber. That also is critical, but also look at other elements that we need here. And the reality is we've got a lot of good people working on this at the moment. We're going to have to spend a lot of time because there's a lot of people counting on us. There are millions of Canadians who work in trade exposed areas of the economy who need us to get this right and to work our way through it. So wherever we were 6 months ago, we are in a different place right now, and we have to work very hard to make sure that we get a deal that is good for Canadian workers.
I mean, obviously you're on Team Canada here, right? But there is this push-pull of alignment and conflict with any government, right? You disagree with what they did with the Chinese electric vehicles, calling it a threat to the people you represent in the auto sector. How do you calibrate those tensions, in this larger forum that you've now is going to be for the first time on Monday?
Well, I'm elected to represent the people of my union and to bring the voice of working people to this table, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm not a shrinking violet, David, so I'm not going to be shy about doing that. And anyone who knows me knows that. And we have a chance here to make sure that we can get through this in a way that protects the industrial economy of Canada, and that's what we've got to keep focused on. But at the same time, I'm still going to be critical where I need to be critical, because that's part of the job that I need to do. Right. And our members have to be represented. And I will say to you that I have no doubt that the China deal will be an irritant at this CUSMA table, as other things will be. But I have U.S. irritants as well. I mean, they have a situation there where they have right to work states. I think that gives them, it's unfair trade in many ways, and we should be tackling that at this table. For sure, they will talk about things like forced labor. We know where they're going to come and the kinds of things they're going to bring. It just means that we have to be very prepared with our counter arguments in all aspects here.
Okay, so as a final point, this committee meets on Monday, in person, I believe, mostly, for sure, for the first time. But the very next day, we get the spring economic update. And there may be some new measures in that. I mean, are there things you are watching for workers who might be affected and displaced by this, or to help them take advantage of whatever the new domestic opportunities are? What are you going to be looking for on Tuesday from the finance minister?
I mean, well, we have put in a proposal around some of the things we'd like to see. One of the things I have said to Minister Champagne is the government is going to have to be prepared to have robust worker supports just in case they are needed as we go through the coming months. That means we may have to do targeted industry supports. It may mean that we have to look at things like wage subsidies. We just have to be prepared for whatever is going to come at us. We've had a rough economic year. It's not, we're not through the woods yet. And so the government's going to have to be prepared for all of that. And when you look at the situation in Iran right now and what that's doing to energy prices, this is also going to put a lot of pressure on our economy in Canada. So things are not going to get any easier. But we take it one bite at a time, and the reality is we've got to focus on getting a renewed agreement right now with the United States.
Lana Payne, National President of Unifor and member of the Prime Minister's Advisory Council on the Canada-U.S. trade relations. Always appreciate the time. Thanks for being here.